Welcome! Today we're going over all of the songs that Taylor Swift has written about Matty Healy. Yes, that's right, all of these songs are about Matty Healy because this woman is crazy. But it's okay, that's why we get good music. If you're entering this video without any context or are simply really nosy, I've put together a 5-minute timeline of literally everything that happened between Matty and Taylor. If you feel like you know enough already or simply don't care enough, please feel free to skip forward. I'll put the timestamp on the screen right now as well as in the video chapters. Now, if you don't know anything about Matty Healy, he is a member of the band The 1975, and when he and Taylor first met back in November of 2014, it was because she attended one of the 1975 shows.
I met a lot of people. I met Taylor Swift, and that was really nice.
From what we see online, they were kind of like fans of each other beforehand but had never met in person. After the show, Taylor attends a few more shows. Matty is rumored to sing some songs to her, and they're also rumored to hang out after these shows. This, of course, starts up a ton of dating rumors, and Matty eventually responds to these saying, like, who the hell is Matt Healy? Because the tabloids literally got his name wrong because the big publications didn't know about him, but they knew about Taylor Swift. The very day after this tweet, Matty starts, like, breaking down on stage, crying, like, sinking down to his knees. He also reportedly says that he told somebody he loved them and they didn't say it back, also posts some suspicious, like, tortured poetry on his Instagram, then deletes it, and then starts promptly denying all dating rumors with Taylor, as he was before.
It is bloody fake. It's all fake. It's all a farce. She's the biggest pop star in the world. I'm in Australia. There's no, like, relationship or anything happening. So that didn't really happen as much as it'd be amazing for me if it did. Unfortunately, it didn't.
Like a month after these rumors sort of die down, they both attend the Brits after party where Taylor meets Calvin Harris and then they start dating. Throughout 2015 and 2016, Matty just sort of keeps getting asked about Taylor, but the narrative shifts from we didn't date to we couldn't date because I was scared of all the publicity around her and what it really meant to be her boyfriend. Then throughout 2017 and 2018, stuff kind of quiets down until 2019, where Matty all of a sudden is like, Taylor, hit me up if you want me to produce your next record. In 2020, both of them attend the NME Awards and hug and catch up. And then in 2021, Matty starts working with Jack Antonoff on the 1975's next record, and Taylor then starts working on Midnight, also with Jack Antonoff, who is famously like one of her producers. Rumors start circling that they're working on Midnights, but Matty's like, no, we're not, trust. Then later in a podcast, he says,
but then you also gave it to Taylor Swift early. She got an early listen.
She heard bits of it, like through Jack. Yeah.
Did she return the favor with her latest release and let you listen to it before the general public?
Yeah. We actually worked a bit on that, but then the version of it never came out.
Boo!
No. That's not how it works. It was for reasons that are not to be criticized. She's amazing.
Once Midnights comes out, Matty starts posting about it. He's like stream Midnights on his Instagram, and he says also that he was listening to Hey Steven. The song Question is then added to the 1975 pre-show playlist. We'll get into that later. And then in January of 2023, Taylor does a surprise performance at the 1975 show, which was a really big deal. Because she sung Anti-Hero, which she hadn't sung before, and that was like from her new album.
I was thinking of doing one that I'd never played live before.
I'm not kissing anybody in front of Taylor Swift. Have some respect. From the Queen. It's not happening.
In March, Matty just ghosts his ex, and then a couple days later, Taylor changes the Eras Tour setlist from Invisible String to The One. Like a week later on Matty's birthday, I have to say, it's announced that Taylor and Joe have broken up. Matty then deactivates his socials, which is honestly what I would do if I was about to go public with Taylor Swift as well. For the next month, he just keeps saying really suspicious things on stage, and finally, in May, he says, while playing About You by the 1975. Like 2 days later, he then flies 20 hours to see Taylor's concert where she mouths the exact same thing while playing Cardigan. Right before this, The Sun reports that they're dating as well. Matty then attends a bunch of Taylor's concerts. We have a bunch of paparazzi snipes of them going out on dates and such. At the end of March, Taylor performs this absolutely delusional speech right before playing Question.
I don't know. It's not just a tour. It's like, I don't know. I just sort of feel like my life finally feels like it makes sense. And so I thought I'd play this song, which brings me really a lot of happy memories.
A week after this, The Sun reports that Matty and Taylor are supposedly moving in together, and then a week after this, they reportedly break up. A week after this, Matty reactivates his Instagram, and for some reason, a whole month after this, the Sun is like, Taylor and Matty are back together and want to make it work at all costs. And then the same month, Taylor removes About You from the Air Store pre-show playlist. And then in August, she starts dating Travis Kelce. Credit to Spicy Size on Tumblr for a lot of the information and this timeline, and if you want to know even more, please go check it out. I'll link it in the description. Let's get started. So the majority of this video is going to be presentation style, just because this is way too much for me to edit, and we're going to start off with the Tortured Poets department and the most obvious songs on that, and sort of work our way into the Lion's Den. Trust me, it's going to get a lot more entertaining, just bear with me. The most obvious song about Matty on this record is Fresh Out the Slammer. Here, Joe equals 6-year relationship equals jail. She says, now pretty baby, I'm running back home to you fresh out of the jail. I know who my first call will be too. This is obviously about Matty, since she started dating him right after she broke up with Joe. There's some lyrics in the song that point directly to him being an old flame, such as get the matches, toss the ashes off the ledge, and I will never lose my baby again. There's also a couple lines like, as I said in my letters and swirled you into all of my poems, that imply that she has definitely written more than one song about him. I don't really have that much to say about this song. If you don't think this is about Matty, you might be in a phase of denial. Moving on. Next we have Guilty as Sin, which is also one of the most obvious songs on the album. We're gonna try and speedrun this one. So Joe is still the equivalent of jail. My boredom is bone deep. This cage was once just fine. Some even more obvious hints that this is about Matty include Drowning in the Blue Nile. He sent me Downtown Lights. Downtown Lights is a song by the Blue Nile, which is one of Matty's favorites apparently.
I love the Blue Nile. There's an album called Hats by the Blue Nile. It's one of the best albums of all time. You can hear so much of the 1975 in that album.
The phrase, I hadn't heard it in a while, also implies that this is the rekindling of an old flame. I also find it interesting that it starts with he sent me Downtown Lights, maybe implying that Matty started all this by texting her. This could very well have been when they were working together on the Midnights album and just mutually connecting through Jack Antonoff and discussing music. There's also a general theme of just hardcore fantasizing while in a relationship with someone in the song, hence Guilty as Sin. There's also a hint to her being afraid of public disapproval when she says throwing my life to the wolves or the ocean rocks. This also connects to the Tortured Poets department poetry, which she released alongside the album if you haven't seen it. It says, and so I was out of the oven and into the microwave, out of the slammer and into a tidal wave, the slammer as we know being Joe and the tidal wave therefore being Matty, which matches really well with the lyrics throwing my life to the ocean rocks. She also says, I keep these longings locked in lowercase inside a vault. We know that Taylor refers to unreleased songs as vault songs. We also know that 2 of her albums are in lowercase, so maybe, perhaps, there were some songs on Folklore and Evermore that she just never released because they were way too obviously about Matty. Instead, she went with releasing the ones that were more disguised as storytelling. Anyway, we'll get into that later. The next song is Down Bad, because Taylor was indeed down bad, although I don't think she used it in this slang sense in this song. Anyways, the concept of this entire song, from what I gather, is an alien comes down from the sky, shows Taylor a whole new world, and then leaves. She says, did you really beam me up in a cloud of sparkling dust? You showed me that this world was bigger than us, then essentially sent her back where she came from. She says she's staring at the sky, waiting for the alien to come back and pick her up. And then she says, in a field in my same old town that somehow seems so hollow now, they'll say I'm nuts if I talk about the existence of you, which is what somebody would say if they were talking about an alien. Now, the whole concept of the song points to Matty, since it's essentially about someone that she fell in love with for a brief period of time, and then they left. She says, for a moment, I knew cosmic love. This doesn't really match her relationship with Joe, nor Travis Kelce, who she hasn't broken up with. There's also a theme of this person, Matty, kind of love bombing her when she says, did you really pick me up just to do experiments on, tell me I was the chosen one, which implies he was kind of just lying and making false promises of their future. This theme is going to be very relevant for like the next 5 songs as well. There's also a theme of Matty not being well behaved and people not generally liking him when she says, I loved your hostile takeovers and all your indecent exposures. And then she says she'll build him a fort on some planet where everybody can understand it, because they don't, because he's an asshole. She also says the line, like I lost my twin, which we'll get into later, just remember that. Now, if we briefly skip over to Midnights, there's a song on that album that is really reminiscent of Down Bad, and it's Snow on the Beach featuring Lana Del Rey. It starts off with literally saying, one night a few moons ago, I saw flecks of what could have been lights, aka a UFO, aka an alien. There's just a bunch of space references also scattered all around the song. We have But Your Eyes Are Flying Saucers from Another Planet, we have Stars by the Pocketful, and we also have Guilty as Sin all over again. She's saying she's flying in a dream. She says that hiding this relationship would be so dishonest, and it's fine to fake it until you make it, till you do, till it's true, which implies that this relationship hasn't happened yet, but she wants it to. She also says, can this be a real thing, can it, which kind of solidifies that. And she also says, I don't even dare to wish it. Once again, Guilty as Sin. The line, weird but fucking beautiful, also kind of gives off the vibe that this relationship was unexpected. After all these years, she probably wasn't expecting him him to reach out. She also might have left him kind of an Easter egg or a clue that this was about him in this one. She says, "And my flight was awful, thanks for asking." There was probably a time where she was still with Joe that they just started reconnecting and texting but not really hanging out. So this is probably from then, although I'm just really speculating here. And we also have "Life is emotionally abusive," which is probably referencing Joe. Poor Joe. Joe is getting slandered on this album. Now, coming back to our analysis of the Tortured Poets department, we have the title track, which I think just encompasses the theme of making fun of a tortured poet, because she says, "I think some things I never say, like who uses typewriters anyway." You know who does use typewriters?
But I really like typewriters as well. I don't have one with me because that is really impractical.
This guy gives off such tortured poet, I write in my notebook and on my typewriter in the dark vibes. She also says that she laughed in his face and said, "You're not Dylan Thomas and I'm not Patti Smith." Both of these are poets that used to live in the Chelsea Hotel, and coincidentally, Taylor and Matty are both songwriters, so this is probably referencing their mutual hobby, saying that they're not tortured poets, they're just modern pop stars. There's also a weird line that says, "You smoked, then ate 7 bars of chocolate." It's kind of random, but as we know, with Taylor, things aren't usually random. Matty smokes, so that's probably a reference to him, but chocolate is also a 1975 song, and bars could be music bars. Maybe, possibly. You never know with Taylor. She also says, "Like a tattooed golden retriever." Matty has tattoos. Joe doesn't. Joe really doesn't. Next, she says, "I chose this cyclone with you," which could be referring to all the public disapproval and the media that was coming out around the time that they started hanging out. Also, the twin reference from the earlier song is reflected in "You're not Dylan Thomas, I'm not Patti Smith." That's giving sort of, we're both tortured poets, we're both writers. We understand each other vibes, as well as the lyrics, "Who's gonna hold you like me," and "Who else decodes you," "Who's gonna know you," all of those. But I admit the song doesn't really highlight that twin flame aspect of their relationship as much. We'll get into more of those later. Next, Taylor says, "But you told Lucy you'd kill yourself if I ever leave, and I had said that to Jack about you, so I felt seen." Lucy Dacus is a mutual between Taylor and Matty. I don't know that much about her, and I'm not willing to go into another rabbit hole. This video is going deep enough as it is. All I know is she's a mutual, and Jack Antonoff definitely is too. Next, she says, "At dinner, you take my ring off my middle finger and put it on the one people put wedding rings on." This reflects more false promises of the future, or rather more promises that we know turned out to be false, from Down Bad. Speaking of public disapproval, "But Daddy, I Love Him" is essentially a big fuck you letter to the entirety of the media and also some of her fans. There was a crazy amount of media when the news came out of Taylor and Matty holding hands and saying "I love you" to each other. Fans apparently wrote an open letter that expressed concern and requested her to stop dating Matty Healy. There was also something about a fan union where fans were saying, "We do free work for you, so we should have a say in your personal life." It was very weird. I know this is also to her fans as well, because she says, "I just learned these people only raise you to cage you." She was in a way raised onto her pedestal and also raised by her fans. So that's what I interpreted that line to mean. She also says, "Too high a horse for a simple girl to rise above it." This essentially reflects the high horses people were riding when they were saying that they should have a say in her relationship. She also says, "Now I'm running with my dress unbuttoned, screaming, 'But Daddy, I love him.'" But then in the next line she says, "I'm having his baby, no I'm not, but you should see your faces," which definitely makes it clear this is not actually to her dad, but to your faces. She's breaking the fourth wall and speaking to her audience. We also have some crazy / bad boy vibes in the song. "I know he's crazy, but he's the one I want. He was chaos, he was revelry, me and my wild boy," all that stuff. She also references kind of having a good girl image in the song. She says, "Dutiful daughter, all my plans were laid, tendrils tucked into a woven braid." Maybe all her plans were referencing her plans with Joe, I don't know, but we have the contrast of a good girl, bad boy. Next, I have "I Can Fix Him," in parentheses, "No, really, I can." First of all, I think this title might be a nod to the way the 1975 titles their songs, and this is not the only nod on the album. I think Taylor was way more familiar with Matty's discography than anybody would like to know, because this is the only time she's formatted a title like this, and if you look at a lot of the 1975's albums, they have just a title with parentheses after it continuing the title, if that makes sense. But moving on to the premise of the song, it's everybody disapproving of a guy who is a bad boy and has bad manners, and I suspect this is once again about Matty Healy. Looking at all the bad boy references from the previous songs, we can kind of infer this, and also based on his public image. We have a reference to Matty smoking, again, that the smoke cloud billows out his mouth like a freight train through a small town, which I think is a clever way also of saying he doesn't think before he speaks. She also kind of gives up on fixing him at the end of the song. She says, "Whoa, maybe I can't fix him," which implies that this relationship is no longer happening. Finally, the song gives off suspiciously Western vibes. We have just the musical intro. We also have her saying the jokes that he told across the bar and his hand so calloused from his pistol. Where have we seen these themes before? Oh look, it's Cowboy Like Me from Evermore. Hear me out on this one, because the song isn't that clear to decipher. However, we have clear references to an old flame where she says now she knows she's never gonna love again. We also have major twin flame vibes again. She says, takes one to know one, you're a cowboy like me.
Cowboys like to kind of go out and find new pastures. My only advice would be like, just be a cowboy. So be a cowboy.
She also says, we could be the way forward and I know I'll pay for it, which may be alluding to her reputation once the press finds out that she is with Matty. If you're looking at the song by itself, it doesn't necessarily give off this is definitely about Matty Healy vibes, but if you take into account all of the lyrics on all of her other albums that are about him, this kind of fits into the picture really well. We also have another Starry Eyes reference in the song. The space references on Snow on the Beach and Down Bad weren't enough. She says, you're a bandit like me, eyes full of stars. If we move on to the next song in the Tortured Bones department, we get The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, which is probably the most ruthless diss Taylor has ever written, and also happens to have the lyric gazing at me starry-eyed. This kind of paints a much clearer picture of what happened between her and Matty. The premise is some guy making false promises of the future, we've seen that before, presenting her with an untrue version of himself, essentially, and then leaving without explanation, and Taylor being absolutely flabbergasted by this. She says, was any of it true? Gazing at me starry-eyed, and your Jehovah's Witness suit. Matty wears suits, but also a Jehovah's Witness essentially tries to preach their religion to you and can kind of be seen as dishonest in some cases. And then she asks, who the hell was that guy? She also says, like, you tried to buy some pills from a friend of friends of mine, they just ghosted you, now you know what it feels like, which I think is our first real clue as to how exactly things ended with her and Matty. I think he might have just ghosted her like his previous ex-girlfriend. We also have the lyrics, cause once your queen had come, you treat her like an also-ran, and also cause it wasn't sexy, wasn't forbidden, which implies that he was waiting for her all this time, but once he finally got her, he didn't want her anymore, which is in line with the whole pining for each other for 10 years thing. I also don't think she'd say the line, you'll slide into inboxes about anyone but Matty, really. A fun fact is that he has a whole album titled A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, so that's just a fun thing. Finally, she has the lyrics, you kicked out the stage lights, but you're still performing. So this is definitely a reference to Matty just performing on tour. Also, he and the band turn out the stage lights themselves, so that feeds into it. This is just a pretty genius lyric to write about another songwriter. Finally, we have the first theme of Taylor being so confused by him leaving. We have, were you sent by someone who wanted me dead? Did you sleep with a gun underneath our bed? Were you writing a book? Were you a sleeper cell spy in 50 years? Will all this be declassified and you'll confess why you did it? That is a flabbergasted woman if I ever saw one. Moving on to My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, right away we kind of have a reference to The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived when she says, cause it fit to write puzzle pieces in the dead of night, which is a nod back to her asking if this case would ever be declassified. And once again, we have a reference to an old flame when she says we could have played for keeps this time. Also, all her Sandcastle references and saying he was my best friend down at the Sandlot. First of all, twin flame vibes, bestie vibes, but second of all, these kind of childhood Sandlot references might be alluding to the fact that she met Matty when she was way younger and they were kind of naive. I felt more when we played Pretend also feeds into that, but it's also a fantasizing reference once again. When they were playing Pretend, they were fantasizing about being together. She then continues this by saying that she felt more because Matty took her out of her box, which probably means just taking her out, being out in public after her 6-year relationship with Joe. This is also a Bejeweled reference, which we'll get into later. Also, I just have to say all of the clever little toy references in the song are gold songwriting. I felt more when we played Pretend than with all the Kens, Review-Lets to Send My Plastic Smile, the Sickest Army doll purchased at the mall. She's very on theme. And then finally, she says, he left all these broken parts and told me I'm better off. This is a reference back to Down Bad, where she says, how dare you think it's romantic leaving me safe and stranded, implying that in some capacity he left her because he was trying to keep her safe from himself. Next, Loss/Love of My Life. Now, when I first heard this, I'm not gonna lie, I thought this was about Joe, but if you really look at it carefully, there's a bunch of things that allude to this more being about Matty. Now, the reason I at first thought this was about Joe, because she says still alive, killing time at the cemetery, never quite buried, about her relationship. And we know that with Joe, it was probably kind of like a slow end that you come to after years of being together. The relationship is just slowly dying. However, taking all of the other things in the song that I'll discuss briefly into account, I think this is actually about Matty and the brief period after he left her that she thought they still actually had a chance. Also alluding to the fact that this has been going on for ages and their relationship has always been kind of buried, but never quite buried. So starting off strong on the fourth line of the lyrics, we have, we embroidered the memories of the time I was away, stitching, we were just kids, babe. I said, I don't mind, it takes time. Yet another Old Flame reference, a pretty direct one at that. Right after this line is, I thought I was better safe than Starry-Head, which is like actually the fifth reference to this. We also have stuff about the person betraying her, one-year impressionist paintings of heaven turned out to be fakes, and then a con man sells a fool a get-love-quick scheme. This just doesn't sound like Joe. The lines, if you know it in one glimpse, it's legendary, what we thought for all time was momentary, kind of reflects the fact that she got this glimpse of forever that we also talked about in Down Bad with Maddie. Even though she might have thought at the beginning of her relationship with Joe that it was also for all time, she definitely felt the same way with Maddie. It was just a very quick relationship. We also just have a bunch of things that hint at this guy lying to Taylor and then leaving. All those plot twists and dynamite, Mr. Steal Your Girl, then make her cry. He did kind of steal her from Joe, which makes sense, and I definitely wouldn't describe Joe as the Mr. Steal Your Girl type in any capacity. On theme with this, she says, the coward claimed he was a lion. I'm combing through the braids of lies. I'll never leave, never mind. This is just not the vibe of a relationship dying slowly over the years. This is the vibe of somebody just betraying you. On the theme of betrayal, we also have false promises of the future. You said I'm the love of your life. You shit-talked me under the table, talking rings and talking cradles. Once again, at first this sounds like Joe, but if you take the other songs into account, he apparently told her that she was the one and made her false promises. There are definitely some songs about Joe on this album, like So Long London, but in these, she's not really angry at him for making false promises of the future like she is in this song. She's more just sad that he slowly drifted away from her, and that's the only thing she's angry at. We also have another hint at how he left her. Hint, hint, he definitely ghosted her, because she says, oh, what a valiant roar, what a bland goodbye, implying that they stirred up such a fuss, and both emotionally and in the media, and then had just such a bland goodbye, which implies there wasn't really any argument. Maddie sort of just left. It's a fortnight. This definitely feels like it's somewhat inspired by Maddie, but it's not fully the story of their relationship. Now, at first I thought this was about Maddie because they were together for a very brief period of time. Even if it wasn't quite a fortnight, it was still brief in comparison to her other relationships in this time. However, now I think it might be referencing the very short time for which they were kind of together, kind of dating back in 2014. Because after somebody writes the smallest man who ever lived about you, I really doubt that they turned into good neighbors and were commenting on each other's sweaters. There were, however, many opportunities for them to run into each other, as they did between 2014 and 2023. They share friends like Jack and Lucy, and also both record at Electric Lady Studios. They also ran into each other at a few awards ceremonies over the years.
Sometimes it gets me crossing your jet stream.
There's also slight lyrical parallels in this to Guilty as Sin, where she says, without ever touching his skin, and now it's kind of the opposite of that. It says, I touched you for only a fortnight, but I did touch you. And then emphasis on that again when she says, move to Florida, buy the car you want, but it won't start up till you touch me. There's also an interesting parallel to a 1975 song called When We Are Together, where they sing, you ask about the cows wearing my sweater. It's something about the weather that makes them lie down. This, of course, can be written off as a coincidence, but also given the amount of the 1975 stylistic references in the music video, which I discussed in another video, I think that it is very feasible that Taylor made subtle nods to their lyrics all throughout this album. So, ending our analysis of the Tortured Poets department, what have we learned about their relationship, really, to review? It was like a slow burn over many years. They met back in 2014. It was an old flame. They kept kind of meeting each other. We also have Taylor fantasizing a bunch when she was in her relationship with Joe and essentially wondering what if we did happen. And then, when they got together, Maddie eventually left, ghosted, and just made her a bunch of false promises, gave her a bunch of lies, and in response to this, Taylor was confused, sad, surprised, angry, and overall very emotional. We also have the theme of Maddie just being a bad boy in general, and people around Taylor and the media not liking him that much. Did you think we were done with the entirety of the Tortured Poets department? Just kidding, we still have the entirety of the anthology left. To speed up this process, we're just going to see if the categories we just discussed are checked off by all these songs. So starting off strong, the Black Dog, the lyrics of which check off all 5 of these. We have the reference to an old flame, old habits die screaming, maybe not that direct, but then we have also Taylor fantasizing, quote, that was intertwined in the magic fabric of our dreaming, my longings stay unspoken, guilty as sin like 4.0. From the general tone of lyrics as well as the line, I just don't understand how you don't miss me, we can tell that even though we don't know if they ghosted, we can tell that the other person left because she misses them and they don't miss her. Taylor is also confused in this. She doesn't understand why they left. And finally, we have a reference to Maddie being a bad boy and lying. She says, you said I needed a brave man, then proceeded to play him until I believed it too, and was it hazing for a cruel fraternity I pledged. Finally, we have another Matty smoking reference. She says, I still miss the smoke. This is also a nod to just an old habit being addicting, which is a good play on words here. We also have a reference to the starting line. When someone plays the starting line and you jump up, but she's too young to know this song. Matty has covered starting line a few times, most notably in the shows leading up to Matty and Taylor starting to date. You might also ask yourself, where even is the Black Dog? Now, there's a few candidates here. A lot of fans seem to think that this was the Black Dog pub. I think that was in London. However, key word here, pub. Maybe it wasn't as romantic as the bar and she changed it, but coincidentally, there's a Black Dog bar in Cork, Ireland, next to which the 1975 played one of their shows. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. This might also be coincidental, or it might just be Taylor playing on words. In Fresh Out the Slammer, Taylor also says, now we're at the starting line, I did my time, which is kind of a parallel to the starting line. Just another cool detail to mention. Next, we have the song I'm Gonna Get You Back. Now, the title of this one is a bit odd. It has no spaces, and if you look at the entirety of Taylor's discography, she's really never done a song title like this. However, if you look at the 1975 discography, you're gonna find Falling For You, which Matty has sung at Taylor and dedicated to Taylor at a few of his shows back in 2014. We can't check off all of the 5 categories here, but we do have a reference to a slow burn over many years. You'll find that You Were Never Not Mine and Push the Reset Button were becoming something new. They're resetting their old relationship. We also have the theme of Matty leaving and ghosting her and just being careless with their relationship. I'm an Aston Martin that you steered straight into the ditch, then ran and hid. We also have Taylor being pretty confused. Whether I'm gonna be your wife or gonna smash up your bike, I haven't decided yet, but I'm gonna get you back. This is a slightly different sentiment to The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, which is why I think this took place more in the same time frame as the Lost/Love of My Life song, where Taylor still didn't know if she and Matty were over for sure, if he just wasn't responding to messages for the heck of it, and she essentially still had hopes of getting him back. Coincidentally, in the song Falling For You, Matty sings, all we need's my bike and your enormous house, and in this song, Taylor says she hasn't decided if she's gonna smash up his bike yet. Also, a fun little coincidence. Next, we have Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, which initially really confused me when I first listened to it, but if you look at the initial lines, she says, your hologram stumbled into my apartment, hands in the hair of somebody in darkness named Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. I think it was Ali Sheehan that said this, that your hologram essentially means that she saw, not him physically, but she saw a video of him online making out with somebody who was in darkness. She didn't see them, but they were named Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, and that's why it's the title of the song. She's imagining them with someone else. It doesn't really matter who, it's just someone, and she doesn't like it. Matty also has a habit of kissing fans on stage, so there's definitely videos like that out there. Once again, we have a slow burn reference, as the decade would play us for fools. If you want to break my cold, cold heart, just say I loved you the way that you were. If you want to tear my world apart, just say you've always wondered. We also have some references to Matty being a bad boy and being rude and lying. She says, you said some things that I can't unabsorb. She also says, you turned me into an idea of sorts, which may be a reference to the fact that over the 10 years that they spent kind of daydreaming about each other, Matty slowly turned her into an idea rather than an actual person that he was in love with, and once he finally got his queen, as we saw, he didn't really want her anymore. Right after this, she says, you needed me, but you needed drugs more, and first of all, Matty has struggled with addiction problems in the past, but second of all, I just can't imagine this being about Joe or Travis. Also, another Old Flame reference, down that passage in time, back to the moment I crashed into you, like so many wrecks do, too impaired by my youth to know what to do. In this, she also says crashed, which might be a parallel to the lyrics in Guilty as Sin, where she says that she keeps dreaming of crashing into him tonight. And then she says, will that make your memory fade from this scarlet maroon? Is that a maroon reference? Is that a maroon reference? Let's see. Let's look at the lyrics of Maroon. When the morning came, we were cleaning incense off your vinyl shelf. Now, is this about Joe? Maybe? I don't know. This gives more like Matty tortured poet vibes once again. She also says, like you were my closest friend, once again, bestie twin vibes. And then, of course, we have another mention of a slow burn / Old Flame romance. She says that rust grew between their telephones, and then she asks, how the hell did we lose sight of us again? We also have some Taylor fantasizing again. She says, I wake up with your memory all over me. So considering a reference to literally the lyrics Scarlet Maroon on Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, I think it's pretty safe to say that the song is probably about Matty. A lot of people wonder, including me, about what she means when she says it was so scarlet, it was maroon, and an interpretation I've heard of this is that it was so scarlet, their love was so bright that eventually it had to dim into a maroon and turn into this kind of never fully actualized love. To me, this song is like kind of one of the saddest songs on the anthology. The whole gist of the song is essentially losing someone, waiting for them all these years, and then eventually giving up on waiting, because at the end she says the woman who sits at the window has turned out the light. I think this song kind of gives us the best insight we have so far into how Matty and Taylor's relationship ended back in 2014. She said you were going to grow up, then you were going to come find me. Words from the mouths of babes, promises oceans deep, but never to keep, implying that they made this promise to each other to come back to their relationship when they're older, when the timing works better, when the publicity works better, but it never ended up happening. This also gives the impression that it was a lot more serious than a lot of people might have thought if they were making all of these promises. She also says, and you said you'd come and get me, but you were 25. Guess how old Matty Healy was when he and Taylor were dating? He was 25. Now, I have to ask the question, where have we seen Peter Pan in Taylor Swift's songwriting before? That's right, we saw him on Cardigan when she says, tried to change the ending, Peter losing Wendy. In the song, we have another starry reference, you drew stars around my scars. We also have a lot of Matty-specific lyrics. She says, but I knew you'd linger like a tattoo kiss. Once again, Matty has tattoos, and the smell of smoke would hang around this long. Once again, he smokes. Also, I don't think she would describe Joe as the type to dance in his Levi's drunk under a streetlight. That's just me. She also says sensual politics, which was a really weird line when I first heard it. I think everybody was kind of confused about what Cardigan was about. But in retrospect, when we look back at why Taylor and Matty didn't really go public with their dating back in 2014, there's a bunch of press releases about Matty essentially talking about the fact that when he was around Taylor, he was spooked by all the media attention she would get and the bodyguards, and he said he just kind of wasn't ready for that. And Taylor, I'd imagine, was skeptical about all of the bad press she would get for associating with someone like Matty Healy. Not that he's necessarily bad, but he kind of has a different reputation from the kind of good girl she was trying to portray back in 2014, and therefore sensual politics. There's also lyrics about this concept on Folklore, I think. It was in some other song. We will get to it eventually. Finally, in Cardigan, we have the reference to being in a prison with Joe all the way back in the Folklore era. She says, and when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed, you put me on and said I was your favorite. Now, I can give Joe some slack and say that maybe she felt like she was an old cardigan back in 2014, and this really isn't his fault. But then again, Taylor had just released 1989 back in 2014. She was like at the height of her popularity. I really think Joe just really messed this one up. Granted, it's also weird that she says he's already put her on and said she was his favorite when they weren't dating and she was with Joe. However, I think this might just be more of her fantasizing, and after all, Folklore is really a storytelling album, so if there's any album where Taylor doesn't really stick to the details, it's definitely this one. Finally, she says your heartbeat on the High Line. Where's the High Line? The High Line is in New York City. Where does she mention New York? Maroon. She says they were dancing in New York with no shoes. Just a fun little coincidence once again. Coming back to the anthology, we're almost done. Given the Peter Pan reference in Cardigan, I do have to wonder if Peter was initially supposed to be released on Folklore or Evermore, but she ended up not releasing it because it was way too obvious. Going back to the reference of keeping her longings locked in lowercase inside a vault on Guilty as Sin, just a fun little theory. A lyric that kind of corroborates my theory that this was on Folklore is in closets like cedar, preserved from when we were just kids. Like, in closets like cedar, that's just like a very Folklore-ish lyric to me. This was also clearly written before their relationship in 2023, because in the song, nothing has actually happened with them yet after this brief relationship. She's just hoping it will and eventually giving up on it. There's not that much anger, only sadness. Finally, we're entering the maybe territory of the anthology. We just have the song I Look in People's Windows. We have Taylor being really confused. She says, I'm afflicted by the not knowing so, and I still ponder what it meant now. She also says she's addicted to the if only, which is a really popular theme surrounding Matty, but I don't know about this one. This one's really non-specific. Moving on to Midnights. Midnights is probably the least specific record Taylor has ever released, and I think this is for a reason. This is for the reason that she was in a long-term relationship, and she didn't want that person to know who she was writing songs about. First of all, we have Snow on the Beach. We've already discussed Snow on the Beach. Snow on the Beach stinks of Matty Healy. Next up is Question. This is another song that didn't make any goddamn sense when I first listened to it, but now it sure does make a whole lot more sense. She starts off the song saying, I remember, which is an interesting parallel to the 1975 song About You, which Matty has dedicated on stage to Taylor multiple times and has told her on stage that this is about her. In this song, he just keeps asking, do you think I have forgotten? So this might be an answer to that, or a coincidence. Don't you think there's a little bit too many coincidences going on here? I think so. Anyways, right before singing Question on stage at one of her shows, Taylor did this.
My life finally feels like it makes sense. I thought I'd play this song, which brings me really a lot of happy memories. Good good girl, sad boy.
This was also right around when she and Matty started dating. The final bit of lore here is that this song was actually added to the 1975 pre-show playlist in the beginning of 2023, also when Taylor and Matty were becoming a thing. Now let's go back to our tried and true check marks. We have the slow burn. She says, we had one thing going on. I swear that it was something, because I don't remember who I was before you painted all my nights, a color I have searched for since. She had something with this person and then lost it. We also have Taylor fantasizing. The entire song is essentially hinting at the fact that she really wants to ask this person a question. And that question is essentially, do they miss her? Do they still want her? We also have some bad boy references. She says, but you were on something. It was one drink after another drug reference. We also have some pretty Taylor and Matty specific lyrics. She says, good girl, sad boy, and caught in politics and gender roles, which sort of ties back to what I said about them being incompatible in 2014 because of their different reputations and their different popularity statuses. Finally, we have a really specific lyric that says, did you realize out of time she was on your mind with some meathead guy that you saw that night? Now, I have to wonder if this is specifically referencing the Brits after party, which is the first time Taylor and Matty kind of spoke in 2014 or 2015 after they went their separate ways and the dating rumors surrounding them kind of stopped. This was also the night that she met Calvin Harris, and so he could have literally watched her go out with this meathead guy. Also, the entirety of the chorus of the song is just straight up rambling. Did you ever have someone kiss you in a crowded room and every single one of your friends was making fun of you, but 15 seconds later they were clapping too, then what did you do? This just sounds like something very specific that she wrote about one specific person, and only this one specific person can know what she's talking about, and I think this was done on purpose. Next we have Maroon. I'm not going over this one again. Welcome back. It is the next day, and today we're starting off strong with Glitch. Now, this song doesn't really reek of Matty like some of the other ones, but it does have one curious line that stood out to me. She says, but it's been 2,190 days of our love blackout. What's 2,190 days? It is exactly 6 years. Now, for fun, let's add 6 years to the date that Matty and Taylor started dating, which is around December of 2014. If we do that, we get December of 2020, which is right around when Evermore was released, but it was way before Midnights was released. So a song that was written in that time frame would have definitely gone on Midnights. And lines like, we were supposed to be just friends, you don't live in my part of town, but maybe I'll see you out some weekend, and I was supposed to sweat you out in search of glorious happenings of happenstance on someone else's playground, kind of exclude this song from being about Joe, because this is someone she just keeps seeing around. Once again, an old flame. By you don't live in my part of town, maybe she means that she lives in London and he is also British, so he kind of lives in the same city, but they don't really see each other. That could be a cool reference. We also have another starry reference, this time in the line, nights are so starry, blood moonlit. And finally she says, and that's romance, let's dance. Now, if we go back to Cowboy Like Me, this song starts off with, and you asked me to dance, but I said dancing is a dangerous game. Now, Glitch literally seems like a continuation of that, where she at first didn't want to dance with him, she didn't want to engage in a relationship with him, but now she's ready to see where it goes. She wants to dance. There's quite a lot of songs in the honorary mentions of Midnights, just because all of these songs are so unspecific that it's impossible to really tell who they're about. It's different, I think, could be very well about Matty. We have kind of a slow burn theme going on again, like waiting for a bus that never shows, you just start walking on. They say that if it's right, you know, each bar plays our song, nothing has ever felt so wrong. We also have Taylor fantasizing. She says, bet I could still melt your world, argumentative, antithetical dream girl. She then continues this by saying, I heard your key turn in the door down the hallway. Is that your key in the door? Is it okay? Is it you? Or have they come to take me away? Which is kind of the exact emotional state where the entire Tortured Poets department starts off. I think this is her just generally going insane because she's been fantasizing about this guy on and off for like 10 years, which is a very clear theme in the Tortured Poets department. Finally, we have, I used to switch out these Kens, I just ghost. Where else were Kens mentioned? Yes, on My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, where she says, I felt more when we played pretend than with all the Kens, just a cool little Easter egg there. We also have Paris. The entire premise of the song is essentially just about a relationship that she kept private from the media, and we can see this in lines like, no, I didn't see the news, we were somewhere else, privacy sign on my door, and on my page, and on the whole world, romance is not dead if you keep it just yours. And then later she also says, I want to transport you to somewhere the culture's clever, confess my truth in swooping, sloping, cursive letters, let the only flashing lights be the tower at midnight. So flashing lights implying paparazzi. There was a privacy sign on the door, they were somewhere else, they weren't paying attention to the media, probably because there was no media. Granted, this could be about any relationship that we really didn't know that Taylor was in at the time. I'm sure there would have been a good amount of those, but once again, she's still writing about this person, so there is a pretty good chance this is about Matty. Finally, Bejeweled. While it's not directly about Matty, I think this gives us a good insight into what she was feeling at the time that this album was being written. This whole song is essentially calling Joe a jailer again. She says, familiarity breeds contempt. Don't put me in the basement when I want the penthouse of your heart. Once again, this is a very worrying lyric for somebody to write who's in a long-term relationship. I don't know what Joe was on, or if he even listened to her songs, honestly. She also says that she made this person her world, which is really on theme with her relationship with Joe when she moved to London for him. And then she says, I miss you, but I miss sparkling, which implies that she just misses going out. Maybe she misses the publicity, that comes with being the world's biggest pop star, but instead she's like trapped in this house. If we also go back to the lyrics of My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, the lyric, he took me out of my box, makes much more sense because she literally feels like she was trapped in a box while she was like cocooned in her little house with Joe. There's also a fun lyric in the song that says, and when I meet the band, they ask, do you have a man? And I can still say, I don't remember. I think it would be pretty funny if this was implying that the band was the 1975. Next we have Folklore, which I think the only reason this album was branded as storytelling was because she wanted to use people for inspiration, but she didn't want Joe to know who those people were or that they were even real people. I think in this album she was kind of realizing the fact that she was kind of curious about what would have happened with Matty had they actually tried to make their relationship work. First off, we have The One. She says, I thought I saw you at the bus stop. I didn't know. We have Taylor just fantasizing once again and going slightly insane. She also asks, but we were something, don't you think so? Roaring 20s, tossing pennies in the pool. I think this is once again a reference to having romance with someone when she was younger. This whole song is essentially questioning if a past romance was the one for her. She says, I persist and resist the temptation to ask you, if one thing had been different, would everything be different today? This also kind of mirrors the entire theme of Question, where she just wants to ask this past romance if they're still interested in her. Next is Cardigan. We discussed Cardigan. We're going to skip through this one. I also just put some honorary mentions down for the Folklore album. It's fun to just guess who these are about. In August, she says, for the hope of it all, and August slipped away like a moment in time because it was never mine. Honestly, I think August might have just sounded like an aesthetic month, but she and Matty were together for a very brief moment of time back in 2014, so it could be referencing that, but I genuinely have no idea. We also have Illicit Affairs. Once again, the themes of infidelity that are present on these albums would be worrying to me if I was Joe. To the person that's kind of making her daydream in her committed relationship, she says, look at this godforsaken mess that you made me. You showed me colors I can't see with anyone else. Where else does she say this? Yes, in Question. We have the line, because I don't remember who I was before you painted all my nights a color that I have searched for since, which is like identical. Moving on to Evermore. We have Gold Rush, one of my personal favorites. She says, at dinner parties, I call you out on your contrarian shit, which is kind of the first clue we get that this isn't really about Joe. A contrarian, if you don't know, is someone that apparently opposes or rejects popular opinion, and I don't think Joe gives off those kind of vibes. You know who is always stirring up controversy? Matty Healy. We also have Taylor fantasizing again. She says, I see me padding across your wooden floors with my Eagles t-shirt hanging from the door, and my mind turns your life into folklore. I can't dare to dream about you anymore. This doesn't really give off the vibe that she's in a relationship with this person right this minute. She also says, I don't like that anyone would die to feel your touch. Everybody wants you. Everybody wonders what it would be like to love you. This is kind of implying that this person is a very public figure, and Matty Healy fits that description. She also says she constantly has quick brushes with him, walk past, quick brush. This is once again alluding to the fact that they may have just been circling around each other during the years after 2014. Next we have Ivy, which is very much giving someone saving me from my long-term relationship, which is a prison kind of vibes again. She says, my house of stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you, her house of stone being her current relationship. She also says, he's in the room, your opal eyes are all I wish to see, he wants what's only yours. That's a pretty clear reference to just being in a relationship that she doesn't want to be in. My pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine, but it's been promised to another. Need I say more? She also says, I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. Once again, a fantasizing reference, and she also has quite a few mentions about this being an old flame. So she says, I'd live and die for moments that we stole on begged and borrowed time, implying that she had a relationship with this person prior, but it didn't really work out. She also says the old widow goes to the stone every day, but I don't. I just sit here and wait, grieving for the living. She's just waiting for someone. Finally, we have the line, your touch brought forth an incandescent glow. Where have we seen these vibes before? In Snow on the Beach, where she literally says she hasn't seen someone lit from within like this before, which I think is a very fun parallel. Next, we have Cowboy Like Me. I think I've covered enough ground on this one. I'm just going to skip over it. Then we just have some honorable mentions for the Evermore album. We have the title track, Evermore, where she says she's writing letters addressed to the fire, which essentially means that she's writing letters to someone, but she just ends up burning them because she can't send them. I had a feeling so peculiar that this pain would be for Evermore kind of gives off the same vibes as the one where she's just waiting and pining for someone. She also says, is there a line that we can just go cross, implying that there is currently a line, maybe because she's in a relationship with someone, but she kind of wants to cross that line. She also says, floor of a cabin creaking under my step, which is an interesting parallel to Gold Rush, where she says that she sees herself padding across his wooden floors. Next we have 'Tis the Damn Season, essentially just the line, the road not taken looks real good now, time flies tells me all I need to know. This is about a past romance that she didn't engage in at the time, but now she feels like might be a good idea. Right Where You Left Me is an interesting one. I think this one's more about the storytelling rather than a specific person in general, but it does give off the vibes of her waiting for someone for a very long time. Finally, we have It's Time to Go, Champagne Problems, and Tolerate It, and I've grouped these together because they're all about leaving a long-term relationship or being unsatisfied by a long-term relationship. Once again, if I was Joe, I would have been very worried because she was sourcing emotional inspiration for these from somewhere, even if she wasn't feeling these emotions to that full extent at the moment. Finally, we have Lover. Now, Lover was released after she was sort of in her honeymoon phase with Joe, so I think a majority of these songs are just about him and finding someone that she can rely on and finding someone that's really great for her. There is, however, one song on the album about a breakup that has already happened, and it's called Death by a Thousand Cuts. So this one can't physically be about Joe because she's already separated from this person, which she makes really clear in the song. And lo and behold, once again, we have Taylor fantasizing, flashbacks waking me up, but if the story's over, why am I still writing pages? We also have a reference to an old flame. I look through the windows of this love, even though we boarded them up. Chandeliers still flickering here, because I can't pretend it's okay when it's not. We also have another reference to these people kind of being in the same town. She says, I see you everywhere. The only thing we share is this small town. Once again, I think we've covered ground on that before. She says this person gave up on her like I was a bad drug. Once again, a drug reference. I think these are pretty popular in her songwriting in general, but also in her songs about Matty. She also says, our country, guess it was a lawless land, which is probably a bit of a reach, but it's still a fun parallel to Cowboy Like Me. And she also says, paper cut stings from our paper thin plans, which implies, just like in the song Peter, that this person promised that he would come back for her in the future, but he didn't. Now, initially, I wasn't going to look at Reputation because I thought the lyrics were not specific enough, but now I'm just curious. Her relationship with Matty is kind of difficult to place because it happened right around the release of 1989, so there weren't really any songs about him on that album because it was released before they met, or at least written before they met. And then after that, she was with Matty for a very brief moment and then had 2 other relationships before getting together with Joe Alwyn, and then Reputation was released. First song, Ready for It. The first line is, knew he was a killer first time that I saw him. I don't think this one's about Joe. She also says, knew I was a robber first time that he saw me. The 1975 has a song named Robbers, coincidentally. She also says that nobody has to know about this, and in the middle of the night in my dreams, you should see the things we do, baby. I'm at the place where I can admit that maybe this was about Matty, but this is giving the same kind of bad boy fantasizing vibes and that nobody knew about their relationship. Also, the lyrics, every love I've known in comparison is a failure and never be the same now are giving very similar vibes to previous songs where she essentially says that Matty's shown her colors she can't see with anyone else and painted her nights a color she has searched for since. Essentially, she's saying the same thing here. Endgame also has the lyric, oh, and you and me, we got big reputations, which could very well be alluding to Matty once again. This song, once again, does have some more bad boy references. She says that this person likes the bad ones too. Now, Dancing with Our Hands Tied. I looked at the title of this song and I was like, wait, this smells like Matty. The literal first lyric of the song is, I loved you in secret, which is very true of their relationship, and 25 years old. She was 25 when they were dating. Once again, we have mentions of forever. I could have spent forever with your hands in my pockets. Then she says, people started talking, putting us through our paces, which indeed they did, and that was like the whole problem with their relationship from what I gather. That it was getting too much publicity, and Matty was scared of that, and Taylor was also kind of scared of that. Now, the title lyric, Dancing with Our Hands Tied, once again, the allusions to dancing further on in her discography kind of take dancing to be like engaging in a relationship with someone, and this I take to mean is that they're trying to have a relationship work, but their hands really are tied because they don't have control over how everybody else reacts to it, and they can't really do anything about their relationship. They have to keep it secret. Now, okay, you might be thinking, what? What do you mean? She and Matty dated after she released 1989, so there couldn't be any songs about him on the album. Well, I agree, that's why we have Taylor's version up here. There's a vault song that was released on Taylor's version called Slut that I suspect may have been written after 1989 was released, but since it was kind of from that era, Taylor kind of just stuck this into the 1989 vault tracks. And I think that because if you look at the lyrics, this is like the most Matty song yet, in my opinion. She says, adorned with smoke on my clothes for like the 20th time Matty smokes, and this is like the 20th time she's referenced that in her songs. She says lovelorn and nobody knows about their relationship, and then she says I'll pay the price you won't, which has come up I think in Cowboy Like Me and some other songs exactly in that wording where she says that she'll pay the price for them being together and them being out in the public and he won't. And then the rest of the song, once again, is about her reputation, which she writes a lot about in songs that are about Matty. And she also says, everyone wants him, which is a direct parallel to Gold Rush, where she says, everybody wants you. And finally, she also mentions that in a world of boys, he's a gentleman, which is, for some reason, the sentiment we got in the Reputation songs that I think are about him as well. That's all I have to say in my breakdown today. Once again, these are all theories. These are just my speculations. I don't know any of these for sure, except like the slammer and guilty as sin. Those ones I'm not arguing on. But for legal reasons, I will once again say those are just theories. Let me know your theories down in the comments below, and please press the subscribe button if you made it this far. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but it's definitely like getting up to 30 minutes.